Hi everybody, it's Susan with Pumpkin Hill Stampers. I have a fun Stampin' Show and Tell for you today. As you can see, we're going to be using the Waterfront stamp set, and we're going to be creating this fun card with the palm trees and a nice sunset. This card I'm actually casing from one that I got in a swap earlier this month. I shared this last week. Where they've created that background and did the palm trees. So as you can see, mine's very similar. I'm using a different word set. I'm using the One Big Meaning stamp set today, and this set is on the retiring list. So if you want a great thank you set, get that before the end of May. So I'm using it as a thank you, and I believe when I got this card as a swap, it's on the watercolor paper, but I think they probably used ink and the Aqua Painters to create that. We're going to create it with the BRUSHO today. So let's go ahead and get started, shall we? Okay, so really basic card kit. I'm using thick Whisper White as my card base, just because the card doesn't have a whole lot of layers to it. So I want to give the card a nice strong foundation. So I'm using the thick Whisper White. Then I have a piece of watercolor paper. This is 2x3, an amount of basic black. Simple enough there. So let's go ahead and do the BRUSHO and our stamping. I'm going to bring in another piece of scrap mat because BRUSHO gets pretty messy. And I'm going to use the yellow and the orange BRUSHO Crystals. So this is like watercoloring, only it's with powder. So it can get kind of messy, and being powder, it kind of goes everywhere. Now, I've seen some demonstrators where they just poke one hole in their lid, and actually they keep a tack in it to keep it, closed from their moving it around. I like a lot of BRUSHO, so I've done mine 3 times. So that's kind of a user beware. The more holes you put in the top of your canisters, the more that's going to get out. So if you want to start with one and see how you like it, I would suggest that, and then go from there. Alright, I'm going to zoom in so that you can see me working on my piece of paper here. Okay, so I've got my Aqua Painter. It's full of water here, and being that I'm using watercolor paper, I want to get it wet before I want to put any ink on it. You can see I still have some BRUSHO in my Aqua Painter tip here. So I just squeeze some water out, and I'm just going to pre-wet the fibers on that watercolor paper to loosen them up so that they'll grab the water and so that they will grab the crystals. And you'll see that the watercolor paper will start to bow a little bit, but we're going to use our heat tool after we're done with the BRUSHO here and dry it right up, so don't worry about that. So I'm just going to flip this over and I just tap it. See how it hits the water, and it just kind of starts to streak and spread. And it's kind of cool that the BRUSHO, being crystals, if it doesn't completely dissolve, you can see it here in the finished one, you kind of end up with these natural marks or pigments on the paper. And I think that's pretty cool. Alright, so now what I did was I came in with my Aqua Painter, and I'm just kind of going to help smooth it out a little bit. I don't need to smooth out all of it. You don't have to smooth out any of it if you don't want to. It's your card. Do as you wish. But you might want to do some swirls in it to spread it out a little if you don't want it to be so pigmented. Okay? And so I'm just going to kind of paint mine yellow all over. Then what I did on my other one is I came back in with the orange. And so what I'm going to do, I want to tack that down a little bit. I don't want it to be so bowed when I'm working on it. I'm just putting a little snail in there, and I'm sticking that down to my paper. Okay, that'll work a little bit. So now I'm just I can see by looking at the sideways and seeing where my light's coming in, I can see where it's wettest. But I'm going to add another drop of water up here kind of in the center. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some orange. So I'm just going to flip over my orange and tap that a bit, and let's see where it goes naturally in that water streak. So I could leave it like that. I think I want to blend it out a little bit, but you see how it's streaked this way? I think I'm going to follow that with my brush strokes. Just kind of extend the streak a little bit. smooth it out a little, but I'm going to leave some of that orange pigment in there. So your aqua brushes, you just want to paint them clean on your scrap mat when you're done. You could also use the mister to apply water to your paper. So either tool. I just decided for this one I wanted it really wet and saturated. Alright, so now I'm bringing in my heat tool. I'm going to zoom out, but you'll see that as I heat the paper and dry it, because we want to stamp on it now, it'll help flatten it out a bit too. So let me move some of this out of the way. This gets a little loud, so you can always fast forward on the video if you need to, but it doesn't take too long, so bear with me. See it getting crisp on the sides? That helps me know that it's getting dry. So as it starts to curl up the opposite way, I know it's starting to dry. Now you can touch it. Now being BRUSHO, you might get some of those crystals on your fingers. But, alright, I think it's dry enough to stamp on. So I just pulled that off my scrap. I think we'll be okay to stamp on that. If it's still wet when you go to stamp on it, your ink might be a little bit blurry, so that might not be the best option. So make sure you've got it dried up. Naturally, if you want to just let it dry in the air, you just have to wait till that watercolor paper is dry. Now, I'm stamping on this with our Archival Black, which we currently recommend for when you're doing anything with watercoloring, and since we basically watercolored this piece, that's what I'm using. Now that it's dry, you could use any black ink you wanted to. And our archival pad is actually going to be retired, and they're bringing back the Stays-On black pad that they're going to recommend for watercoloring, and our Memento black pad will stay for working with the blends, the alcohol ink. So I am using the archival ink because I really do like it. I wish it was staying. So I'm going to add 3 sets of trees, just like the one I'm casing. And then I'm going to add the palms. So being polymer, you can just look through and place your images on. Easy enough, right? Okay, so this piece is going to get layered onto our basic black. Now you could use snail, you could use any piece you want. I'm actually going to use the Tombow. I find sometimes that when I use watercolor paper in projects, after a while it dries out and starts to peel, even with strong adhesive, away from its backer. So I'm going to try with the liquid Tombow, if it'll dry slower and maybe adhere to some of those fibers in the paper. Tombow also allows you to move it around a little bit to get positioned. So I'm just going to flip that over and rub it down. So I'm really trying to marry the fibers between the watercolor paper and the black cardstock. Okay, so there's that. So now we're going to bring in the front of our card. So this is going to get mounted up here, and we're going to stamp our greeting down here. Now this could really be any kind of card. This one's a thank you. It could be a birthday. It could be a retirement card or a best wishes. Someone's going on vacation or a honeymoon, right? Something fun. So I'm just kind of going to center that visually for the moment, and then I'm going to stamp my words below. Perfect. And then I'm going to add the black to the card with dimensionals just to give it a little bit of pop on the card. So pretty easy, right? And fun to work with those BRUSHO colors. So the BRUSHO comes in red, orange, yellow, green, and blue. The green is a moss green, so it's actually got a little bit of brown in it. And depending on how you use it, whether you use it like we did where you apply water and then tap it on, or I've done it where I've tapped it onto a block and used it like a watercolor, diluted it with the watercolor and then painted with it. It's really a lot of fun, and you can be controlled or uncontrolled with it, so it's got a lot of options. But remember, it is messy, and being crystals, it can get very muddy very quickly, so you're going to want to practice with it before you actually work on your final project. So there we go. That is our card. For a simple envelope, I often say, you know, I'm going to stamp a card, stamp your envelope. I'm just going to add these palm trees up here to the corner of my envelope. Sometimes the simplest thing to do is the sharpest thing to do. So there we go. And I would love to thank whoever it is that sent me this original swap, but it's not stamped and didn't have a card with it. So I don't know who to thank, but thank you to the Stampin' Up! Demonstrator who swapped with me and gave me this great fun idea. And now I've given you this great fun idea and showed you how I cased it. So if you want the Waterfront set, that one is in our current collection and will continue. And if you want that great thank you set, again, it is one big meaning. And as always, down below I have the links of the products I've used. Also subscribe to my newsletter, and then you'll get this video along with the recipe sheet with the instructions and the measurements on my newsletter next week. And you'll also know all the other great programs that I'm running for my followers and my customers. So, thanks again for sharing some time with me today. I'd love a thumbs up or subscribe here. Let me know you enjoy what I share, and do some fun stamping today. Bye everybody.